Okay, so in this third section, we'll talk about some helpful tools for biblical interpretation. There are a few difficulties that get in the way when we're trying to interpret the Bible. I used to have a professor named Victor Furnish, and he would always say, we must never underestimate the historical distance between ourselves and the people who wrote the Bible. And they're very different than we are. I mean, have you ever traveled in the Middle East, for example? If you've traveled in the Middle East and you're from Ohio, or Texas like I am, you probably will encounter some culture shock. Once I took a group of students to Cairo. I was like, whoa, I didn't know which way was up in Cairo. Once I took a group of students to Bangkok, Thailand. That was really something else. I don't know the customs, don't know the language, don't know how to get around, don't know what eye contact means, don't know, what's considered respectful or disrespectful. I tried to read up on all these things before I went. For example, if you are in the Middle East, do you know that it's disrespectful to sit with your foot like this? But we do it all the time, right? We do it in church. Or if you're in church, you don't even cross your feet. The reason is it's disrespectful to show the sole of your foot to someone. In Thailand, we learned that, let's say that you drop a coin accidentally on the floor and it's rolling away, and so you step on it to stop it. Well, in that case, you've committed a faux pas because the face of the king is on the coin. And so you don't put your foot on it. Okay? These kinds of cultural things are these kinds of cultural disconnects are extremely common. And it's very easy to make mistakes, especially the first time you go to a place. Now, that's in the 21st century, right? That's contemporary. Tack on 2,000 years of distance, and you can begin to see the historical distance between ourselves and the people who wrote the Bible. Another problem is that these are written in different languages. We're always reading the Bible, unless you take the biblical languages in seminary or as an undergraduate. You're reading in translation. And so you are, to some extent, reliant upon the translators for your work. And there are probably 3 or 4 or 5 different translations in this room. I'm using the NRSV, but I bet several of you are using the NIV, right? Is anyone else using a different version of the Bible than the NIV?
New American Standard.
New American Standard. Today's English, okay. Anyone using the Message? The Message, okay. Yeah. New Living. Okay, see, look, we got all these different translations in here. That looks like a King James. Okay, so yeah. Okay, I could just tell by the type. Okay, so we're all going to have different translations from one another. And as my same professor, Victor Furnish, used to say, every translation is an interpretation. Okay? So, what we have to do is we have to use the resources at our disposal to get behind the text and to kind of figure out what the historical and literary circumstances are. Biblical translation is very difficult, and not just because it's a linguistic difference, but the Bible was written in what's called scriptio continua. And that means it was written in all caps with no spaces and no paragraphs and no verse numbers. or chapter numbers.
No spaces.
No spaces. No. So if you look, I mean, if you're going to read these really, really old biblical texts, you really have to know what you're doing.
What's that called again?
Scriptio continua.
Scriptio.
And now I have a Greek New Testament here, and it does have spaces between the words. It has capital and lowercase Greek letters. It has chapter and verse numbers. But the thing about it is all of these are the result of editorial decisions that were made by textual critics, people who figure out the text. And some of our ancient texts of the Bible, we don't have any originals, don't always say the same thing as one another. So people have to make decisions about which text was more likely original. Okay? So it's very difficult work. Now, let's say that we come across a passage like Mark 7:11. I'll just back up to Mark 7:9. Then he said to them, "You have a fine way of rejecting the commandment." He's talking to the Pharisees and some of the scribes. He says, "You have a fine way of rejecting the commandment of God in order to keep your tradition. For Moses said, 'Honor your father and mother,' and whoever speaks evil of father or mother must surely die. But you say that if anyone tells father or mother, 'Whatever support you might have had for me is korban,' that is, an offering to God, then you no longer permit anything for the father or mother, thus making void the word of God through your tradition that you have handed on." Now you might have a study Bible. Like I'm using a HarperCollins Study Bible. I also recommend the New Oxford Annotated Bible or the New Interpreter's Bible. These are good. There are other good study Bibles too. My study Bible has a note in it here, but if you don't have that, you might, or you want more information than you'll get in a study Bible, you might want to get a Bible dictionary. Now, you could get a good one-volume Bible dictionary at any bookstore. This is the Erdman's Dictionary of the Bible, and this is my favorite one, but you could also get the HarperCollins Bible Dictionary. That's another good one. And let's look up and see what korban means.
Mine says it belongs to God.
What says that?
The parentheses.
Yeah, it says in the parentheses it belongs to God. But that's not a whole lot of information. So let's parse this out a little bit. A term referring to religious gifts reserved for God. The gift could be an animal for sacrifice, a vegetable offering, or a gift of precious metals. In Leviticus, the term distinguishes the animal separated from the rest of the herd or the grain sheaf taken from the harvest as an offering to the Lord, thus removing this property from mundane uses. In the New Testament, Jesus warns about the practice of declaring property as korban to evade responsibilities towards parents, a strategy allowing the owner to avoid spending it to support parents in their old age, thus permitting the setting aside of an obligation towards God. Okay? Now, with that background, this passage makes more sense, doesn't it? Now, let's look at Hebrews 5:6. Hebrews is a heck of a confusing book. I mean, you really have to get into some of this historical stuff to get a handle on Hebrews.
5:6.
Uh-huh. Okay. I'm going to back up to 5:5. So also Christ did not glorify himself in becoming a high priest, but was appointed by the one who said to him, "You are my son, today I have begotten you." Now where's that from? You might have a note in your Bible.
110.
Yeah, Psalm 110. As he says in another place, you are a priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek. Where's that from?
Psalms 110.
So Psalm 110:4. Right. You are a priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek. Now if we look back at Psalm 110, these verses are there. Well, what in the heck does that mean? Being a priest according to the order of Melchizedek. I mean, who is Melchizedek? Does anyone know?
One of those names you skip over.
Yeah, right. But it's important in Hebrews that Jesus is a high priest. He's not a high priest, according to the, he's not a Levitical high priest. He's a high priest according to the order of, he's not from the tribe of Levi. He's from,
Salem.
Before that,
is a high,
He was, yeah.
Abraham paid tithes to the first time.
right.
Prince of Salem.
But some say
Prince of
that-
Salem, right?
Salem.
Right, Janie, yeah. Prince of Salem, or King of Salem. He appears in the Old Testament exactly twice. Once in Genesis 14 and the other in Psalm 110. So, that's not very satisfying, is it?
Some say he's Seth.
So what we would do is we would go to the old Bible dictionary and we would look at the segment on Melchizedek. Okay? We find a whole section on Genesis 14, a whole section on Psalm 110. And then that background should help us to interpret what's going on in Hebrews. So, what we learn here, if we would do our background work on Melchizedek, the writer of Hebrews wants to understand Jesus as a priest, but Jesus is from the wrong tribe to be a priest. He's not from the tribe of Levi. From the tribe of Judah, right. And so because he's from the not from the tribe of Levi, according to Israelite tradition, he can't be a priest. But there's another place in the Bible that mentions another kind of priest. In Psalm 110, you are a priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek. Well, now I got another option. What does the order of Melchizedek mean? Who knows? So we got all kinds of interpretive freedom now. And the author takes that interpretive freedom. Okay? So something like a Bible dictionary or a good commentary. Now, we'll get to commentaries in a minute. A Bible dictionary or a good commentary can be really helpful for you as you're working through different books of the Bible. Now, I have a list of commentaries here. Would you pass some around back that way and pass those around that way? And these are commentary series that I think are reliable. It doesn't mean that that every commentary in every series is great. I think these are reliable series of commentaries if you want to get good Bible commentaries. Okay. Now some of these, yes, Bob?
I thought it was all on the internet.
Yeah, okay, let's talk about the internet for a minute. Okay. You thought it was all on the internet. Well, that's the thing, right? Is that, yeah, there's so much, and there's so much junk on the internet too. I mean, there's so much that's just wrong on the internet. The problem with the internet, I mean, a great thing about the internet is that anyone can publish on the internet. And a terrible thing about the internet is that anyone can publish on the internet. Because normally when you write an article, like if you write an article as a scholar and you want to be published in a journal, or you write a book, it goes through a process of peer review. And so I'll send a book manuscript to a publisher, and then they'll send it out to other scholars in the field who have some expertise. And let's say, well, they might say, oh, we don't want to publish this, or they might say, we want to publish it with these revisions. And then they'll send it back to me, and I'll have to make those revisions. Okay? And so there's some quality control on it, in other words. You have different sets of eyes looking at it. What's that? Accountability. Whereas in the internet, you can just say anything. And sometimes you get really great stuff on the internet, and sometimes you get just total nonsense and gobbledygook on the internet. Okay, so I recommend using commentaries out of these series. Now some of these are more advanced than others, like the Hermeneia series is a very technical commentary series. Word Biblical Commentary is a very technical evangelical commentary series. Some of them, like the Abingdon New Testament Commentary, for example, these are not highly technical commentary series, and they're a little bit more readable.
Which ones did you say were more technical?
Hermeneia and Word. And Sacropagina can be. Okay. All right. Another good resource to have is a concordance. Now I've got a couple of concordances here. You got Strong's? Okay. Now here's the thing. When you get a concordance, the concordance is keyed to a translation. So let's say I want to look up the word love. I want to find every place where love is used in the Bible. Okay. In that case, if I'm using a King James Bible, this is going to be a great concordance because you see, this is based on the King James Bible. But if I'm using this with an NIV Bible, it's not going to send me to every place that it says love because you see it's keyed to a different translation. So I would need to get a concordance. You have to have a concordance that matches the translation you're using. Yeah, here you go. And then this is called an analytical concordance. Okay. And this is keyed to the New Revised Standard Version, which is the English version that I usually use when I'm teaching. And the reason it's called an analytical concordance is that every word in here, for example, every word in here, like the word small, okay? Now this is only for the New Testament because this is keyed to the Greek words of the New Testament. So it says, it has the word small. It'll give you all the passages where the word small occurs in the New Revised Standard Version of the New Testament. But then it will also tell you what the Greek word is, and as it'll tell you there are 3 different Greek words used in the New Testament for small. Okay? There are 3 words: elikos, mikros, and oligos. And it'll tell you which of those 3 words it's using. Now, for each of those words, it gives you a number. And then you can go to the back and trace that number all the way through the New Testament. So you can find every place in the Bible, in the New Testament, that the word helikos is used. Every place in the Bible that the word mikros is used. Now that's if you're really getting into some serious study. But the important thing when you get a concordance, and concordances are great tools, is that it be keyed to the translation that you are using. Otherwise, it's not going to be very helpful to you. Okay? There are lots of different editions of the Bible out there too. I mean, Zondervan has about 10,000 different versions of the New International Version of the NIV Bible. But there are different versions of the NRSV and the Message and the Message Remix and all kinds of stuff like that. I mean, you really want to find one that works for you. But for serious Bible study, I like to use a more wooden translation, like a more literal translation. For serious Bible study, I generally don't use something like the New Living or the Message, even though I think those can be really good in preaching. Just because I want, if I'm not using my Greek New Testament, a more literal rendering of the text. Okay. All right. Any questions?
You ever used Young's literal translation?
No, I've not used Young's literal translation. Is it good? Oh, all right.
I've heard a couple occasions where somebody's used that.
Okay.
When you teach at the seminary, do you recommend that everybody have the same version?
When I teach at the seminary, do I recommend everyone have the same version? I require my students to have an NRSV Bible at the seminary. And I give them a choice of either the New Interpreter's Bible, the HarperCollins Study Bible, or the New Oxford Annotated Bible.